Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Furman. Welcome to Vox Novus, the new voice. The human animal is in big trouble. An ecological and social storm is upon us, and the stress is growing more intense with each passing day. To succeed, there must be a creation of new culture, ideas, and lifeways. We must be radically, ferociously, relentlessly creative. My guest this week on Vox Novus, Frank Forencich, says we must honor the animal. Frank is a passionate advocate for the human animal and a functional future. He earned his BA at Stanford University in human biology and has more than 30 years of teaching experience in martial arts and health education. A former columnist for Paleo Magazine, Frank is the author of numerous books about health and the human predicament. His website is humananimal.earth, and he joins me this week to share his path and latest book, Honor the Animal, Experiential Design for Teachers, Coaches, Trainers, Therapists, Parents, and Health Professionals. Please join me in welcoming to Vox Novus Frank Forencich. Welcome, Frank.
Glad to be here.
Please share with us your early path and challenges and how it led to your background in martial arts and human design.
Well, my origin story, I suppose, starts as a very young person where I had a lot of physical troubles. I was very sick, had a lot of allergies, couldn't really keep up with my peers on the athletic field at all. And it wasn't looking good for me. But my parents got me involved in swimming, and that made a huge difference over the course of a few years. And I went from being really behind the curve physically to catching up. And that led me to get really interested in physical movement and the physical arts. I eventually became involved with martial arts and rock climbing and a whole host of studies having to do with the human body. So that was my transformation, you might say.
For listeners who may have some physical issues, I was told by a doctor, I was having problems with one of my knees, and the doctor told me, get into a swimming pool and start swimming. How important is swimming?
Oh, for me, it was pivotal. It was fantastic because it increased my vitality and it got me over a lot of these sort of vague afflictions that I had. And it only took a few years. So consistently getting in the water, and I eventually joined the water polo team in high school. And that made a big difference in the long-term trajectory of my life.
Tell us about your trips to Africa and what you were searching for.
Right. Well, when I was in college, I was in the program in human biology, and I had a lot of professors who were very interested in human evolution and the big history of the human animal. And they all said pretty much the same thing. If you really want to understand how the human body works, you need to go to Africa and understand the environment that we grew up in. And I took them seriously. I said, okay, I'll do that. And I went to Africa, and I was fortunate. I was able to go on safari to see the natural world, but I was also able to go out with some Kalahari Bushmen, the hunters and gatherers of Tanzania. And that was really exciting for me. I learned a lot.
What were some of the things that you learned from them?
Well, mostly it was the thought experiment of what would it be like to live in an ancestral environment that was normal for human beings for most of our time on Earth, and how that lifestyle would have affected our bodies, being outdoors 24 hours a day, being in small tribal bands, paying a lot of attention to habitat, having a lot of agility, which is the ability to walk long distances without fences or roads or interruptions. And that contact with the natural world would have been very awe-inspiring and very good for the human body and for human health.
Before we discuss your new book, Honor the Animal, please share with us about your 2021 book, Beware False Tigers, Strategies and Antidotes for an Age of Stress. What inspired that book, and what do you share with readers?
Right. Well, stress is such a big topic in the health and fitness world, but it's even bigger than that. And I know that it's such a hot topic because the autonomic nervous system, which drives the stress response, is ancient, and it's a primal part of the human body, and it touches every cell, every organ, every tissue in the body. So if we can use that system well, our bodies will flourish. But if we have trouble with that system, then there are going to be lots of downstream consequences, not just for our health, but for our behavior and our experience in the world. So that's what led me to write the book. And I continue to be really fascinated by stress and the stress responses.
And what did you share with readers about stress in that book?
The primary duality that people need to understand, and I think a lot of people are coming around to this, is understanding the difference between the sympathetic branch and the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. And we've all heard about the fight-flight response. So that is the response of the body for emergency physical action, and typically movement. And this is where we're running away from predators and that kind of thing. And that's a very important piece of the puzzle. And it's very valuable in terms of our survival and our performance. But the other side of the system, the parasympathetic branch, is just as important. And that's the rest and digest response, or what in massage school we called it the feed and breed response. And that's the healing response that helps us put tissues and organs back together when they've been overworked. So the key in all of this is to use it wisely, to have a stress response that is appropriate and acute at the right time, and then to return back to the rest and digest response as soon as possible, and to hang out there, to spend most of our time in rest and digest.
And not carry that stress with them.
Right, right. So it's always the distinction between acute and chronic. Acute is good, chronic is bad.
Yeah. What inspired your new book, Honor the Animal, and who was it written for?
Right. Well, I've been very fortunate in that I've been able to study with a lot of different teachers in the world of martial arts and massage therapy and athletic training. And I started producing some workshops on my own, and I was able to start from scratch. And that was an incredibly valuable experience because I didn't have to follow anybody else's template. I could just make things up on the fly. And I said, what is the ideal experience, say, in a 3-day workshop? What do I want people to take away from it? And that's what the book is all about, is how to design this kind of experience. And it's for anybody who works with the human animal. So it could be teachers, parents, coaches, therapists, trainers, anybody who might want to do one of these experiences with their people. It's a starting from scratch approach. You might even call it a veterinary approach for working with people or the human animal.
Where do we stand? What is the nature of the modern human predicament?
Oh, well, the human animal's in really big trouble right now. And for a lot of reasons, clearly, but the two biggest ones are tied to our biology. The first one is what they call mismatch, and that is simply the fact that our bodies are ancient. Our bodies have this aboriginal wiring, you might say, these aboriginal inclinations, and we're trying to use that kind of wiring in the modern world, which is radically different from the world that we're used to. So that's a big challenge and a big stressor for everyone. And then the other big challenge, of course, is our ecological predicament and the fact that all of our life support systems now are under continuous threat and may actually be past the tipping points of breakdown. So the things, the processes, the life systems that support our bodies are under threat, and in turn, our bodies are suffering.
And what are some of the things that we can do about disconnecting from that aboriginal build in our body?
Well, we really can't. I think that we are going to be aboriginal for a very long time, and our inclinations and our preferences, our behaviors have been shaped by evolution over the course of hundreds of thousands of years. And the modern world has come upon us in a matter of only a few hundred years. So a lot of people have described us as cavemen with cell phones, which is kind of a cartoon, but I think that's kind of accurate. And our social inclinations, our health and lifestyle inclinations have been shaped by events that took place a very long time ago. So we have to work with that and we have to be aware of it.
And where does artificial intelligence come to play in this?
Oh, AI, that's really kind of a pet peeve for me now because it's yet another technology that we don't really understand that's coming down the pipe here with incredible speed. And we haven't even had the conversation yet about how that might play in. And my fear is that, like many technologies, it's going to lead to atrophy in some basic human capability. So it's just as if you use a car all the time to drive and to go places and you never use your legs to walk, your legs will begin to atrophy and you'll become weaker. And the same thing will be, I'm sure, true with AI, that if we rely on AI to explore the world and to take over our creative capabilities and our judgment, then those capabilities will also begin to atrophy. And that does not bode well at all for our future.
And it seems that the companies that are making the AI elements are pushing them for profit rather than taking the societal dangers into question.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is 100% capitalist enterprise, and it's not that people are making the decisions here. Capital is making the decisions. Money and profit are making the decisions. And so these technologies are basically being offered to us without reflection. And that's just not a good way to introduce any novelty or technology to people.
Absolutely. You've shared that humanity looks upon the animal kingdom and nature as others. Why is this both wrong and dangerous?
Right. This is what some people call the myth of human supremacy, and this belief that we are like the apex of creation. We are the alpha animal. We're the best animal that's ever lived. And that attitude, that philosophy is really common in the modern Western world, but it's not a human universal. So, in other words, a lot of cultures, a lot of people on the planet have held a different view, a more participatory view. But it seems over the last couple hundred years, we've shifted now to this belief in human supremacy, this belief in human exceptionalism. And that, at least from my point of view, is a really dangerous attitude to hold because we're just another animal and we have some very impressive capabilities, but so do a lot of other animals. And if we want to have a functional future, I think we need to take a more participatory approach and to start seeing ourselves in participation, in harmony with the natural world. And a lot of conservationists have made this point, but it bears repeating because to hold a arrogant approach to nature is bound to lead to trouble, as we're seeing.
100 years ago, this would not have been even a question. But
Mhm.
where can we intervene as a society, I guess especially with children in schools, and start to bring out the understanding of our relationship with nature and with the wild kingdom?
Right. Well, it's got to be, as my martial art teachers always put it. They said it's always about time on the mat. In other words, we have to be spending more time in contact with natural processes, more time outdoors. And I think we're going to have to give up some of our reliance on technology. I think that the proliferation of smartphones, especially amongst young people, is a real problem. And we're going to have to give up on some of this headlong rush into a technological future. We have to spend more time in nature. It's that simple.
Are we allowing our environment to be abused to the extent that it actually could lead to extinction?
I think possibly that's the case, especially the threat of climate chaos. We're on track now to be at 3 degrees above pre industrial temperatures by 2050. And so that is within one generation. People who are born today will see some horrific climate consequences. And whether or not that leads to extinction remains to be seen. I think the effects will be patchy. There will be some bioregions that are going to go down to extreme weather. And I think there are going to be major food shortages around the world. And there's going to be a lot of chaos and a lot of stress. The consequences here that we're looking at are really severe. And we're not really taking it seriously as a people. So maybe extinction, yes, but at the very least, a lot of turmoil.
And again, what could be introduced into the educational process to change this and to intervene?
Well, young people, I think, need to be told the truth above all. And I think as parents, we tend to sugarcoat a lot of things and we don't want to frighten young people. We want them to have a sense of hope, and that's all legit. However, it's telling the truth is fundamental here. And we're having trouble with that. We're having trouble telling people the truth of what humans are doing to the biosphere now. And we really can't shy away from that. We need to tell the truth first of all to one another and to the adult community, and then as best we can tell that truth to young people and then give them the tools, their activist tools that they can carry forward. And we're really failing to do that right now.
How do we engender advocacy?
I think we need to teach people about the nature of power and the way power tends to consolidate, the way wealth tends to consolidate, the extreme inequality of the modern world, what the capitalist system is doing to people around the world. Some people now are calling capitalism an injustice machine, which I think is a fair description of what it is. So young people need to have the tools, especially the language tools. They need to understand how politics and power actually work, how especially the language of metaphor to talk about some of these problems and to be good public speakers when they address the community at large. So these are tools that we have. We just need to make them available.
Absolutely. Are we a planet of the apes in reverse?
Well, yes, I have no problem with this idea of humans as animals and humans as apes, humans as primates, humans as mammals. Our wiring is so much the same. And chimpanzees, for example, I've been to Africa and I've been to Gombe, where Jane Goodall did her work. I've been out with the chimpanzees, and 98% of their genetic material is the same as ours. So I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to say that they're somehow different from us. Obviously, they're different in subtle ways, but we're mostly the same. And so, yes, primates, mammals, vertebrates, we're all part of the same family.
And what was the lesson from the movie The Planet of the Apes? What did we see in those movies, that series of movies,
Oh,
about how they treated humanity?
It's been a long time since I saw that movie, and I can't really comment on it. But my favorite example here comes from the movie Avatar and Terminator, and some of these works by James Cameron, who talked a lot about our encounter with technology and our encounter with native people. And that, I think, is super relevant right now. And I think we really need to revisit these movies and see the message that was there.
Absolutely. We have the warning. Now we have to pay attention to the warning.
Right.
My guest is Frank Forencich. His book is called Honor the Animal, Experiential Design for Teachers, Coaches, Trainers, Therapists, Parents, and Health Professionals. Frank, please share with our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you and your work.
Well, the book is available on all the usual outlets, but you can go to my website, humananimal.earth, and you'll find everything there, and some of my other books and some of my other videos and that kind of thing. So it's all easy to find.
And what else do you offer there?
I also have a YouTube channel with some nature-based monologues that I do and commentary that I do in the outdoor world. So that might be interesting to people as well.
And we'll be back with more of Frank and Honor the Animal after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
This is Kathy Beal, host of Celestial Compass, featuring astrology you can use. Celestial Compass points you to what's going on in the sky and what you can do with it down here on Earth. We also explore fun, effective, and cosmic tools for navigating this adventure we call life. Join me the first and third Monday of the month at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for Celestial Compass. It's enlightening, entertaining, and empowering.
We asked parents who adopted teens to share their journey.
There are many times I thought, I can't do this. I mean, what parent isn't worried about? What am I not doing right? What am I not doing enough? And then I realized, wait, that's being a parent.
Don't worry about being perfect. I've had around 3 other mother figures in my life, but only one of them has taught me how a mother loves.
The greatest reward for me is he makes me better every day.
I would tell a family considering adopting a teenager that teenager, whoever it is, needs you, and they need what you have to offer.
Taylor's given me hope. He's our son, and that is what he will always be.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to learn more. A message brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
Hey, Dad, your prescription will be ready in just a minute. Hey, Dad, your laundry will be ready in just a minute. Dad, your lunch will be ready in just a minute.
Hey, honey, why don't you take a minute? When you help care for a loved one, you give them as much time as you can, making sure they're safe and comfortable. But it's just as important that you take some time for yourself. At AARP, we can help with information and useful tips on how you can maintain a healthy life balance, care for your own physical and mental well-being, and manage the challenges of caring for a loved one. Because the better care you take of yourself, the better care you can provide for your loved one.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you. You're there for them. We're here for you. Find free care guides to support you and your loved one at aarp.org/caregiving. That's aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is Bill Maher. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week, Frank Forencich, author of the book, Honor the Animal, Experiential Design for Teachers, Coaches, Trainers, Therapists, Parents, and Health Professionals. Frank, not many people talk about experiential design. What is it, and why is it important?
Oh, good. I love this question because what happens when we go through standard curriculums, let's say you want to be a teacher or trainer or coach, we go to school and we receive, you might say, a template. And the template tells us how to conduct our educations that we do with our clients, our patients, our students. And then we tend to stick with those. And what I think we need to do in light of modern knowledge about the human animal is we need to question all of that, and we need to start from scratch. And that's what I talked about, the veterinary model, and say, okay, we've got these animals, these human animals, and they're under a certain amount of distress right now. So starting from scratch with experiential design, what would we do with people? If you just had a group of people and unlimited resources, what would you do? And that's a question that we don't ask often enough. And I think it's a good place to start.
And what would you say we start with?
Well, we've got to start with the human body and the history of the human body and what are our basic needs. Obviously, we need to be in contact with nature to some degree. We need to be in contact with community, and we need to have a sense of meaning and purpose. These are like our three circles of life support that surround us. And that's a good starting place. Habitat, tribe, and community, and then a narrative, a sense of meaning and purpose. If we start there, we won't go too far wrong. And I enjoy the academic disciplines. All of these, the traditional schooling is fine in and of itself, but we need to get underneath that to something more primal.
You say that experience is the language of the body. What does that mean?
I love this phrase because when you study neuroscience, you walk away with a couple of insights. And whether it's changes to synapses or nerve cells, the wrappings around nerve cells called myelin, or whether it's changes to the cortex of the brain, all of these things are what they call use dependent. In other words, those changes only take place in response to use. In other words, experience. So you use the brain, you use synapses and neurons in a particular way, and they will respond with transformation. They won't respond to anything else. Experience is the driver. Repetition is the driver of nervous system transformation. So it's correct to say that experience is the language of the body. And I happen to love language, and a lot of us use language in trying to transform one another, and language can have an effect. But really, when you get right down to it, it's the experience that the whole human animal has that changes the body, that changes the nervous system.
So I'm working in my kitchen, and I don't have a glove on my hand, and I reach out to grab a pot, and I don't take into consideration that there's going to be heat coming from that pot, and my hand starts to burn. Is that experience?
Oh, absolutely. And it's poignant in and of itself, but if it happens several times, if you have repetitions of that, that will drive that learning home deeply into your nervous system, and you will have synaptic changes and changes to neurons and changes to the cortex of your brain, all driven by that experience, all driven by that use. So repetition is everything. And athletic coaches know this, and we need to listen to some of their teaching on this.
So in essence, this is a form of education that comes really through the physical phenomenon, not through the intellectual phenomenon.
Right. And that's something that we need to maybe rethink, especially at the level of academic education and the university, because this model that came to us in the late Middle Ages of the university, where students sit and take notes and listen to lectures and try and drive knowledge into the brain through academic learning, that's one model, but it's not the only model. And if you look at it in terms of human history, deep human history, the primal body-based knowledge has always been the core of this.
How has neglect led to the level of stress that many experience today?
Neglect, as in neglect of the body, neglect in terms of sedentary living, neglect in terms of the domestication of modern lifestyle. that's had a tremendous effect on the human body, especially an atrophy of our muscular system, but also an atrophy of our sensory systems, atrophy in our ability to pay attention to the world. All of these things seem to be in decline. And you might even say the vitality of the human animal itself seems to have degraded over the last few decades, even. So that's part of our trouble.
And also with the advent of COVID and the isolation of people, especially kids not going to a physical school, but joining school through means of computers and such, what do you think that did?
That's been a real big hit to all of us. And obviously the technology enables people like us to have a conversation at long distance, and that's a welcome thing. But too much screen time, this is absolutely clear that cannot substitute for face-to-face interactions with other people. I mean, this is deep social wiring in the human animal. Our brains are literally social organs, and we absolutely need that face time. That's like the gold standard for human social interactions. And technology is really getting in the way of that. The smartphone, and especially the earbuds and the headphones, all of this is getting in the way of our ability to know one another.
And one of the things that's been wired in my head, especially the last few years, is I have to be overly cautious when coming to an intersection that somebody, most of the time teens, are not crossing the street, looking at their phones and not looking at oncoming traffic.
Oh, yeah, it's everywhere now. And I think our ancestors would be appalled at our inability to pay attention to the world. I mean, this is not just a trivial side effect of technology. This is going deeper. And I really worry about young people and their ability, even older people now, and the ability to pay attention in a consistent and sustained way. And if that goes away, then we are at the mercy for all kinds of forces in society that would tend to capture our attention.
Absolutely. And it also, for me personally, I found that those who spend a lot of time on their phones are losing their communication skills.
Right. And the thing that people forget is communication is not just words. The body's always involved and has been throughout history. So the body contributes in terms of our posture, our facial expressions, the pitch and volume of our voice, all of these things. The communication is fundamentally physical, and the body knows this.
Body language.
Yep.
You're looking for common ground among teachers, therapists, coaches, trainers, parents, and health professionals. How would you describe this overlap?
Right. This is what I call a pigeonhole problem, because all of these professions are working with the human animal, and we all desire essentially the same thing for the human animal. We all want our people to be healthier and more functional in the world, and yet we're inhibited by these pigeonholes that tell us, okay, you're only going to work with a certain aspect of the human animal. You might be working with the human mind, you might be working with the human body or part of the human body, and this division of attention ends up being really problematic. And of course, the biggest example of this is the mind-body split of René Descartes, and he gave us this thing several hundred years ago, and he believed that the mind and the body are two separate entities. And modern neuroscience tells us, no, that's not the case. The mind and body are always in dialogue with one another. And yet we have these pigeonholes that oftentimes force us to ignore the totality of the human organism. And that's a structure that gets in our way.
You touched upon this before. You advocate for a veterinary approach to the human animal. Please elaborate.
Well, I just try and get away from the pigeonholes, as you might say. And what if we had a veterinarian come to our planet from Mars? And suppose that veterinarian had an interest in the welfare of the human animal. And this veterinarian has experience working with other creatures and has a start from scratch approach. So what would he or she see as the big stressors and the challenges to the modern human animal? And we've touched on some of those already. But I think that Martian veterinarian would be inclined to have what some people have called a salutogenic approach. Salutogenic means going as far upstream as possible. So salute, referring to health, genesis, meaning beginnings. Let's go as far upstream as possible and start there.
I just had this vision when I started reading your book about jumping up on a table in a vet's office and getting on my hands and knees and sort of panting. I don't know why that came to me, but that's so. But I think, to a certain extent, maybe our physicians today, our veterinarians treat their patients better than physicians are treating their patients.
Well, yes, I've had that thought myself, and I've heard other people talk that way, and it does seem to be true. I've gotten more attentive care for my dog sometimes than I receive in a medical office. And there's a lot of things that contribute to that. And I don't think we have time to go into all that. But yes, I do think it's true that sometimes veterinarians pay more attention to their patients than medical doctors do to theirs.
Yeah, unfortunately. You draw on 3 models for experiential design: martial art, athletic training, and West African drum and dance. How can these models inform our practices?
Right. Well, you can kind of cherry pick here because not everybody's a martial art teacher. Not everybody's a athletic trainer. Not everybody's a drummer. But you can take elements from each of these. So, for example, you might take from the athletic training model, the immersion of the body and the challenge that athletic trainers bring to their athletes, especially what is known as specific training. That's where we look exactly and precisely at the outcomes we're trying to achieve, and then we train people specifically toward those outcomes. So that's a great model. The martial art model, we can draw on things like the focused practice, the community practice that we do together in the dojo. That's a great model. And then in West African drum and dance, the beauty of rhythm and the fact that everyone in class is working together to share in the quest to perfect that rhythm. That's something that we can bring in. Even if you don't know how to drum, everybody can do a beat. And that's a really valuable experience as well.
I've I watched several of your videos on YouTube, and some of the things that you do in terms of the martial arts and some of the exercises look more like a fine, refined dance to me than martial arts. It's just
right.
And
and there's big overlap there. And in fact, some martial arts styles are very dance-like. Kung Fu, Capoeira, all these things really overlap with dance, and you can have a lot of fun with that. But then you could also draw on some of the practical self-defense parts of the martial arts, and that's relevant to some people. And so there's a lot of ways you can go with this.
It's interesting. In the last couple of years, I've spent more time outside of my vehicle and walking, using my feet against the ground than probably all of my life. And what a change has come through me from a physical. I'm 72, and from a physical standpoint, the change has been phenomenal.
Right, and that's the primary locomotor pattern for bipedal humans. So it would make sense. I mean, you're tapping into something that's very old, probably 5 or 6 million years of bipedal history. And of course, our bodies and our brains would work better with that type of rhythmic engagement. So yes, absolutely.
And not only that, but my doctors have given me glorious reviews. My bloods are wonderful. My blood pressure is wonderful. My heart, which I had to actually have stents put on when I was in my early 50s, is wonderful. Everything's working beautifully. And I'm grateful that that transition from getting out of the car and onto the ground, and also just looking at things as I'm walking, getting into that rhythm of walking, and then observing the beauty of the sky and the trees and the plants and the flowers. outdoors. You become one, literally become one with that environment.
Right. There's something about that speed and that tempo of moving through the world that's so different from driving. Because driving at 60 miles an hour, whatever it is, you're taking in this highly visual stimulation, and your body's not participating really at all. So that's pretty abnormal for the human animal. And getting back to walking, that's a more holistic sensory experience for us. And it reminds us of our normal experience on this planet.
Absolutely. My guest, Frank Forencich, his book is called Honor the Animal, Experiential Design for Teachers, Coaches, Trainers, Therapists, Parents, and Health Professionals. We'll be back with more after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human. And she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
I never realized that I'd be taking care of a 2-year-old and a 9-year-old on my own. I think men can be a little stubborn sometimes where pride gets in the way and they may want the help, they may not know how to ask. With my traditions, with the family support in line, and just with my mind frame, I was able to turn a negative into a positive. I knew I needed more tools in my toolbox to take care of these little girls that had just lost their mother. It's time for me to be that father that I knew I could be. I think just being that good role model as well, that models good behavior in front of them, going to work every day, coming home and being able to put on that smile. The biggest reward about being a dad is sitting back and watching your kids be happy.
Never stop being a dad. That's dedication. Find out more at fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
As veterans, we're no strangers to helping others.
That's what we were taught, service before self.
But we do have one question for the veterans listening.
When was the last time you reached out for help?
If you or someone you know needs resources, whether it's for stress, finances, employment, or mental health, don't wait. Reach out.
Find more information at va.gov/reach. That's va.gov/reach.
Brought to you by the United States Department of Veterans Affairs and the Ad Council.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week is Frank Forencich. His book is called Honor the Animal, Experiential Design for Teachers, Coaches, Trainers, Therapists, Parents, and Health Professionals. Frank, you share that we have to be adapted and adaptable. How do we start?
Oh, well, I love this distinction because I think it tells us a lot about how we can train and educate ourselves. To be adapted means your body and your skill set is consistent with a particular environment, one that is usually unchanging. So if you're adapted to a particular sporting environment, say basketball, you're really good at playing basketball, you're adapted to that set of demands on your body. But what if things change? And now you're required to be adaptable. And that's a completely different skill demand because now you have to rewire yourself. You have to learn about some new environment and some new skill set. So for the human animal to be fully functional, we have to be both. We have to be both adapted and adaptable. And to really understand this, I just turn to my dog because my dog is really adapted to my house and he knows every corner and every smell and everything about the house, and he can run at high speed through the house and do all his fun things. But he's also incredibly adaptable. So when we move to a new place, it's not very long before he learns that. So I think he's a good role model for all of us.
You know, with a dog, they say the dog knows everything through scent, that the dog knows when their partner, their keeper, their family is returning based on the fact that the scent of the family disappears over a certain period of time, and then they know the timing when they're coming back, something to that effect. I'm not an expert on it, but that's what I've read. We're not that adaptable, though, are we?
Well, that's what remains to be seen, because what's going to happen with our ecological crisis now is that we are going to be forced into situations now that are extremely unfamiliar and challenging to us. And that's going to be the key, is to be adaptable. Can we leave our adapted cocoons that we live in now and live in some new way? So to do that, we're going to need practical skills, but we're also going to need the psychological flexibility to simply give up the security that we've enjoyed for a long time and now live in some completely new lifestyle. And it remains to be seen whether we can do that.
Are there dangers in embracing the change?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is our encounter with ambiguity and uncertainty, and there's going to be danger ahead, absolutely. And I think the more we resist that, the more we resist this ambiguity, the tougher our transition is going to be. And this is something Alan Watts used to talk about a lot. He talked about the wisdom of insecurity and the fact that the more we tie ourselves to security, the more security we're going to want because we're separated from the flux of life. So, yeah, this is on our calendar. This is what's coming up for us.
But in embracing the change, we are really manifesting an evolution.
I think so. And there may be opportunity in this crisis, and there may be a way for us to enter into some new domain of human experience and human function, new human social relationships. All of these things are possible if we can stay alive long enough to do that. But there's going to be a big transition period ahead.
Tell us about your book and organization, Activism is Medicine.
Oh, right. So this is my attempt to reframe activism, because for most of us, when we talk about activism, it just sounds really stressful. And going into politics on any level seems like a world that's just rife with conflict, and we're going to have to start pushing an agenda, whatever it is. And that's difficult, that's stress-inducing, and I think a lot of us are unwilling to go there. So we don't get involved in politics. We don't get involved in activism. We avoid the whole thing. But what if we looked at it from a different angle? What if we said, well, this activism is really an encounter with meaning and purpose? And what if having that meaning and purpose actually makes our bodies and our minds work better then we're going to get somewhere. And that's what I believe to be the case, because if you have that sense of meaning and purpose, there's medical evidence to show that people are stronger and more resilient when they have that sense of meaning and purpose and act on it. So that's what I mean when I say that activism is medicine. It can make us stronger people.
Absolutely. We had touched upon Western medicine before. From personal experience, it seems that traditional Western medicine as of late is more business-oriented than patient-oriented. Would you agree, and how can we address this?
Absolutely, yes. And in fact, there's a emerging discussion now, not just around the capitalism and the for-profit part of this, but also you might even call it the tyranny of the medical model over the human experience, the medicalization of human life. And Ivan Illich used to write about this. He was worried, he was concerned that modern medicine would become so dominant in our lives that it would eclipse our primal capabilities. And that seems to be the case, because more and more human experiences and human qualities now are falling under the umbrella of medicine. So, for example, if you are shy and you have social anxiety, now that's considered a medical condition. Or if you're short, we have a medical solution for that. We have medical solutions for all kinds of things that used to be simply part and parcel of human life. And that is restructuring our entire approach to what it means to be alive. And as a people, we have yet to take this on. That's a conversation we really need to be having.
Absolutely. In your book, you say, no is not enough. What does that mean?
Well, I took that from author Naomi Klein, and she has been writing about activism and culture for a long time. And she talked about Trump 2.0 and that whole challenge. And she said, yes, we have to protest, we have to resist. All of those things are important. But as she puts it, no is not enough. In other words, there has to be a building, there has to be a creation, there has to be a new domain, a new thing that we build to replace the old. It's not enough simply to tear down the existing system. There needs to be a foundation of something new and something better. And I think a lot of activists, in our frustration, we fail to see that. We're content simply to protest and tear down the old, but that's dangerous if there's nothing to put in its place. So that's what she was talking about.
And this really starts on the community level, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's all about culture, and individual people can have great ideas and great activist inclinations. But yes, any effective work on culture and policy has to be communal, and there has to be discourse. There has to be conversation. And that's what concerns me now. We, with a few exceptions, really aren't talking that much about our ecological crisis. And that's where I hope to make a difference in my work, is to get more people talking about it.
Absolutely. There's a wonderful word in various iterations in Africa. The word is Ubuntu, and it translates as, I am because we are. When a child is born in these villages, a gathering takes place where the question is asked, whose child is this? And the village exclaims simultaneously and unanimously, my child. Are these the philosophies and tenets we need to adopt in our country?
Yes, absolutely. The philosophy of Ubuntu is identification with the tribe. It's a social identification. And in contrast, the modern world, especially in the West here, we're a pretty individualistic, some will even say a narcissistic society. And that focus on the individual and individual achievement, that really distracts us from having a sense of community at all. So we need to go back to that fundamental and look at our deep-seated need to affiliate with one another. That's wired into us. And in that sense, modern culture, modern individualistic culture is an outlier and an exception. So this is something that we're going to have to reckon with, and soon.
And that really is part of honoring the animal.
Right, absolutely, because we are a hypersocial animal.
There you go. What would you like readers to take away from Honor the Animal?
Well, I think the title alone is valuable for people because we get so distracted in honoring other things, most notably money and power and status and that kind of thing. But the title of this book takes us back to fundamentals. If we honor our biology, honor the human animal and the needs of the human animal, not just in ourselves, but in the people we work with, then we will we'll make a step in the right direction. So that would be my desire for this book, is simply to remember the title.
Wonderful. My guest, Frank Forencich, his book, Honor the Animal, Experiential Design for Teachers, Coaches, Trainers, Therapists, Parents, and Health Professionals, and all of us. Frank, please, one more time, share with our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you and your wonderful work.
You can go to humananimal.earth, and the book itself is available in all the usual places, so that's easy to find.
And you also have that YouTube website.
Right. Yeah. I've got the Honor the Animal YouTube channel.
Frank, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing this valid and very important information.
Well, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
And thank you for joining us on Vox Novus. I'm Victor, the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.